Most of the time, the little choices don't feel like choices at all. You follow the GPS because traffic is backed up. You take the quieter campsite because the shelter is crowded. You pull into an overlook, rent the cheap house, sit down for an interview, and tell yourself it's probably fine, because nothing bad has happened yet. But that's the thing about these stories. The danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it shows up as one bar of service, a moved brick, a muddy door handle, or a sound outside the glass that your brain keeps trying to turn into something normal. Today, we're getting into a batch of unsettling true-style horror stories where the scariest part is how ordinary the setup is. So like the video, subscribe if you're new, and let's start on the trail, where getting away from people turns into the problem. This was on a short section hike in Southwest Virginia on the Appalachian Trail. Me and my friend Evan had 2 nights planned: shelter, second camp near a road crossing, then back to the gravel trailhead. We had done overnights before, enough that I thought we were reasonable. Offline map, headlamps, first aid, cheap, power bank, lighter, ibuprofen, short charging cable. No satellite beacon. It did not feel crazy then. By the time we reached the shelter after slick leaves and damp socks, we were ready to stop. Except the shelter was packed. The platform was full, the tent spots were puddled or too close to the loud people, and somebody was smoking weed under the roof. A skinny guy in a rain jacket kept asking where we started, where we were getting off, how far our car was. Normal trail talk technically, but he kept circling back. Evan gave me a look like, no way. I checked the offline map and saw an old gated Forest Service fire road near a trail crossing, maybe half a mile off. Just a gray line, not a real road, but close enough to the AT that I told myself we were not bushwhacking. We were just getting away from people. We reached it before dark. Old gate, tire ruts, crushed beer cans near the gravel, back road trash. We found a flat spot above the road, set the tent, pulled the wet tarp over it, and hung our food bag off to the side. Our boots stayed under the vestibule, and my pack leaned under the tarp, so I could grab it without dragging mud inside. For a while, I felt better. No smoke. No arguing. I woke up sometime after midnight because one of the guy lines moved. Not wind, not loose fabric snapping. It pulled tight, went slack, then pulled tight again. Slow, careful. Evan whispered, "Was that you?" I said no, then whispered that it was probably a deer or raccoon, because I wanted that to be true. Animals bump into things. They don't test them. The line tugged once more. I pressed my headlamp against the tent wall instead of opening the zipper. The fabric lit up, but all I saw were dark shapes and rain spots. I yelled for them to get out of there. Nothing answered. A few seconds later, we heard footsteps on the gravel road. Slow, normal steps. Not crashing through brush, not running, just walking off, like whoever it was had finished. We stayed zipped in until morning. Evan wanted to pack up right then, but going outside in the dark felt worse. Daylight made everything feel embarrassing. We got out stiff and cold and tried to explain it down. Maybe someone from the shelter had messed with us. Maybe a local kid. Maybe an animal had caught the line. Then Evan saw the stake. One tent stake had been pulled out and pushed upright into the dirt beside our boots. Not dropped, not kicked loose. Stuck there straight, where we would have to see it before putting our boots on. That killed the animal idea. Evan wanted to go back to the shelter or turn around for the trailhead. I argued more than I should have. The car was still far off. We had no signal. Everything was wet, and going back felt humiliating. I know that sounds stupid now. At the time, continuing felt like the less bad option. We counted our main stuff, packed fast, and agreed on one thing. We were not staying near that fire road. Back on the AT, we moved quicker than usual. We ate standing up, checked every white blaze, and I kept looking at side cuts and old tire tracks, still telling myself it was one random creep. Our second camp was closer to the normal trail corridor and away from anything that looked drivable. No gravel, no gate, no tire ruts. Just the AT and a flat patch where other hikers had camped before. The food bag went higher and farther out, maybe 30 yards away, past brush where the headlamps did not reach cleanly. I dumped the damp junk from my hip belt pocket beside my pack. For a while, nothing happened. No hands on the tent, no tugging. Then there was a small metallic click from the direction of the hanging tree. Quiet, like a carabiner touching something hard. Then the branch creaked, slow and heavy. Neither of us moved at first. I know how that sounds, but by then we were not pretending it had to be an animal. And unzipping into the dark felt like a great way to make everything worse. I yelled anyway. Evan shoved his headlamp through the tent door and aimed it toward the tree. The beam caught the bottom of our food bag swinging. It was lower than when we went to bed. Not on the ground. Not gone. Just low enough to show somebody had been at the line. We barely slept after that either. In the morning, the bag was still there and most of the food was untouched. But the knot looked wrong. The longer we stared, the more wrong it looked. Some little stuff beside my pack was gone too. My lighter, the old ibuprofen bottle, the short charging cable, not my wallet, not the power bank, not anything that made sense. That bothered me more than if someone had stolen the food. A thief takes useful stuff. This felt like somebody picked small things to show they had been close again. We packed fast and barely stopped except on ridges where I checked for signal. Every buzz was just the map trying to load something it already had saved. I hated every side cut by then. We reached the trailhead early. My car was still in the little gravel pull-off. An old pickup was parked near the far edge, and both of us tried to remember if it had been there when we started. Neither of us could swear either way. At first, my car looked fine. Locked. Windows up. Nothing smashed. Then Evan pointed at the passenger handle. Fresh mud was smeared around it, even though the rain had passed before we started. One wiper was lifted a couple inches. The fuel door was not shut all the way. None of that proved anything. That was the worst part. You could explain it all the way if you wanted to. We checked inside. Nothing was missing. Registration still there, change in the console, hoodie in the back. Then I opened the glove box and saw a lighter on top of the napkins. I usually kept that spare lighter in my pack's side pocket. Maybe I moved it before the trip. Maybe I threw it in there and forgot. I can't honestly say. We did not see anyone at the trailhead, and we did not turn it into a police thing. What were we going to report? Mud on a handle and a lighter I could not swear was moved. On that saved offline map, the old gray fire road lines ran closer to all three places than I wanted to see. And that is not a prank. I know people like to explain stuff away in the woods because the alternative is terrifying. But pulling stakes, messing with the food line, taking tiny personal items, and then maybe touching the car at the trailhead is someone crossing line after line. The worst part is how deliberate it feels. Not stealing to survive, not scaring someone once and leaving, but making sure these two guys understood they could be reached. I don't blame them for trying to rationalize it. You almost have to just to keep moving. But whoever did that knew exactly how vulnerable campers are out there, and that's what makes it so messed up. All right, let's move into the next one. I deleted the proof. I know how that sounds. I wasn't a cop, journalist, or true crime person. I was a second-year grad student doing oral history work in eastern Kentucky, interviewing widows of coal miners for a university archive. Most days were sad, but normal. I drove around with consent forms, grocery cards, extra batteries, and the mileage sheet my department cared about way too much. I asked about mine work, floods, church suppers, maiden names, and benefit papers. At night, I copied files from my little recorder onto my laptop. I did not back them up from the field. I know, most interviews came through local libraries, so when one librarian gave me an extra name between 2 planned visits, I didn't think much of it. Mrs. Hensley lived up on Buckeye Knob and liked talking about old times if she didn't get wore out. The small thing was that the librarian hadn't spoken to her directly. She'd talked to a nephew or some man in the family. Relatives managed appointments all the time, and I was an outsider with a university logo on my folder, trying hard not to act suspicious. The road up there was one of those narrow county roads where your phone shows one useless bar. The librarian had drawn me a map with a church, a closed company store, and a rusted mailbox. The trailer sat back on gravel with a plywood ramp, 3 old vehicles in the yard, and a TV on inside with the sound off. A man in a ball cap opened the door. Another stood behind him, near the kitchen. One said he handled her appointments. The other said she didn't hear too good and got mixed up, so they'd help keep her on track. Again, not great, but not enough to leave. The trailer was cramped and hot. Pill bottles by the sink, mail under a butter knife, old photos of men in hard hats. There were papers on the kitchen table, but the thinner man slid them onto a chair before I really saw them. Mrs. Hensley sat at the end of the table in a housecoat holding a tissue. She was tiny. When I introduced myself, she looked at my mouth more than my eyes. I explained the form slowly. She could stop any time. She didn't have to answer anything. The man in the cap laughed and said, "She'll tell you the whole county, if you let her." She did not tell me the whole county. At first, she barely answered. Where was she born? Up the creek. Which mine did her husband work? She looked at the man in the cap and he answered, "Did she remember the flood in 77? Some." Her hands kept picking at the tissue until it started coming apart. The men sat too close. One by the door, one close enough to hear every click of my recorder. They corrected dates, my names, cousins. When I asked about paperwork after her husband died, the man in the cap said, "She don't want to talk about all that mess," then steered it back to the mine. I almost ended it. I really did. But bad interviews happen, so I asked one of my standard questions. What was your maiden name, and who helped you with the papers after your husband passed? For the first time, Mrs. Hensley looked right at me. She corrected a date one of the men had given, then said a name neither of them had said. The man by the door shifted. The man in the cap stopped smiling. Then she pointed at my recorder. "Put that closer, honey." I thought she wanted to make sure it caught the date. I slid it closer. She leaned down and barely moved her lips. "Don't let them write for me." It was so quiet I wasn't sure the recorder got it, but both men heard. The room changed immediately. The man in the cap reached for the recorder, and the other stayed at the door. Their questions weren't about coal camps anymore. They wanted to know where the recording went, who at the university heard it, whether I had made a copy, and whether my phone had been recording too. That was when I noticed the room in pieces, the door behind the thinner man, my phone beside the recorder, my folder open on the table, my car outside through the dirty window, close enough to see and not close enough to reach. I tried to stay professional. I said Mrs. Hensley could withdraw consent, that the archive didn't have to use the interview, that I could delete that section. The man in the cap only heard delete. He picked up my phone to check if I had filmed anything. I should have grabbed it. I didn't. I kept my hands on the table because Mrs. Hensley was watching me, and the man by the door was watching my hands. The other one made me open the recorder. They weren't good with it, which made it worse. They jabbed at buttons and asked if the university got files live. I ended up telling them which menu to use because I wanted them to stop guessing. My thumb was shaking so bad, I hit the wrong button twice. One held my phone out of reach and made me open the deleted folder. The other held up the recorder and asked, "Does this thing have trash?" Mrs. Hensley tried to talk again. Something about a check, a signature, and one wrong letter in a name. The man at the door turned on her so fast, she folded back into herself before he finished telling her to hush. That was when I understood my fieldwork rules did not matter. They let me leave. After I deleted the file, showed them the empty recent list, promised I wouldn't use anything, and left the grocery card on the table because the man in the cap said she had earned it. He gave me my phone back at the door. I walked my car without running. One of them stood on the porch while I backed around in the gravel, scared of hitting one of their cars and giving him a reason to come down the ramp. I didn't call the police right away. I drove until my phone had service near the highway, sent the librarian a uselessly careful message, then called my supervisor. No recording, no clear accusation. Consent issue. If we send someone out there wrong, we might make things worse for her. A few days later, I went back with a county worker. Same gravel turnoff, same trailer, no cars, no dog. A neighbor said Mrs. Hensley had gone to stay with kin. Another said she didn't know any Hensleys up there while looking straight at the trailer. Later, I found old county records and benefit forms. Not enough to prove anything, just enough to make me sick. Similar signatures, dates that didn't line up, initials written close enough to pass but too steady for the woman I saw shredding that tissue. No usable audio, empty recorder. And the only copy I have left is her whisper in my head. Don't let them write for me. This one is just disgusting in a very human way. Not supernatural, not some shadow in the woods, just people controlling an elderly woman, speaking over her, managing her answers, and then intimidating the one outsider who might have actually heard her. And I want to be clear, I don't blame the narrator for deleting the file. When you're trapped in a trailer with two men blocking the exits, that's not a clean, ethical situation anymore. That's survival. The failure here is on the people exploiting Mrs. Hensley and on every system that made it so easy for her whisper to disappear. Don't let them write for me is such a simple line, and it says everything. On to the next story. I still check the passenger door before I pull out of anywhere. Not my door, not the back doors, the passenger door. I just glance over, make sure the lock is down, and sometimes pull the handle once before I put the car in gear. I have done it at grocery stores, at school, even in my mom's driveway. The thing at the overlook probably lasted 10 minutes, maybe less. That is what bothers me. It was short, and most of that time I was telling my girlfriend. She was probably hearing leaves. Back then, I worked late shift at a diner in the mountains of western North Carolina. My girlfriend Emily worked there too. She waited tables. I did dishes, register, mopping, whatever needed doing, after the manager stopped caring. We both had classes during the day, so by closing, we usually looked half dead. That night had been normal. Rain on and off all afternoon. Wet roads, fog up on the ridge. Near the end, a man came in by himself and stood at the register too long. Emily had already counted the tips once, and the jar was open with singles and a few fives inside. He bought a black coffee to go and asked if the road past Miller's Creek was washed out. That was normal enough. Roads wash out up there. I told him I had not heard anything. He nodded like he was thinking about something else. He did not say anything creepy. He just stood there a little too long. Then he took his coffee and left. By the time we locked up, both of us smelled like grease and cheap soap. Emily had her name badge clipped to her collar because the pin was bent and mine was crooked on my apron. We split the tips and the cook gave us 2 foam boxes of chicken tenders and fries that were still warm. We should have gone home. Easy to say now. Her parents were asleep, my roommate had to be up early, and neither of us wanted to eat in a driveway, like 2 raccoons. There was an old pull-off overlook up the road, maybe 8 minutes out of the way if you counted the switchbacks. We had eaten there before, after shifts. In daylight, you could see the ridges folding off toward Tennessee. At night, it was just gravel, an old scenic overlook sign, a guardrail, and dark past that. That did not scare me then. It was familiar. You pass a place enough times and it turns into part of the road in your head. I drove my old Civic because Emily's car had been making a grinding sound all week. The heater worked when it felt like it, and the windows fogged up if you breathed too hard. We rolled onto the overlook slow because the gravel had washed into little ruts. I parked facing the road because I did not want to back blind toward the drop if another car pulled in. That put Emily's side closer to the guardrail and the low brush behind it. I did not think about it. It was just where the car ended up. The low beams caught the old sign, wet gravel, and the first bend of road. They did not light up her side. Her side was just dark glass, guardrail, and wet leaves outside the window. Emily clicked the locks as soon as I put the car in park. She always did that. Working nights gives you habits. I barely noticed. I was already opening my food box. For a couple minutes, it was fine. Just us eating leftovers while the engine ticked and cooled. Emily complained that the fries were soft. I said they were free, so technically gourmet. That was about the last joke of the night. Then the windows started fogging. The windshield went first around the edges, then the side windows got milky from our breath and the hot food. I wiped a circle in front of me with my sleeve. Emily did the same on her side, just enough to see the guardrail. Past that, there was not much, just dark and branches lower down the slope. My phone had 1 bar, then none, then 1 again. Normal for that road. Emily checked hers and made a face. She was halfway through a chicken tender when she stopped chewing. That is one of the clearest things I remember. Not a scream. Just her stopping with the food still in her hand and turning toward the passenger window. I said, "What?" She held up 1 finger. At first, I thought she heard a car coming down the hill, but there were no headlights ahead of us and no engine behind us. Just my car ticking, water dripping from the trees, and that soft, wet leaf noise you hear all the time in the mountains. She leaned toward the little cleared spot in the glass, but not all the way. "I heard something," she said, so I listened. There was something, I guess. A faint, uneven sound from her side, down near the guardrail. Not steps, more like a scrape, then nothing. A drip. A branch shifting. "It's probably a possum," I said. She looked at me like she could not believe I was already explaining it away. "I'm serious. I know. There's deer all through here too. Could be anything." I was not trying to be tough. I was tired. The food was getting cold. I did not want to make a whole situation out of 1 sound, and I really did know that place. Or I thought I did. Then she whispered it sounded like a cough. That got to me a little. I wiped the windshield again and looked over the hood. Nothing moved in the headlights. The road was empty. The old sign was there, and beyond it, the road dropped away through the trees, like always. If somebody was out there, we'd see them, I said. Which was not true. We could see in front of us, we could not see low beside her door. Emily's voice went flat. "Start the car." I should have just done it. There is no version where I have a good reason. Starting the car costs nothing. We could have left, but I got irritated. Not really at her, at being tired, at the phone having no service, at the idea that this dumb little overlook we had used a dozen times could suddenly be a bad idea because of a sound I barely heard. I said, just give it a second. She kept staring at the passenger window. Then I heard it too, closer this time. Not a cough, not leaves. It was a soft, dragging sound right beside her door, slow against the glass or the rubber seal, like cloth, or maybe a dirty glove sliding along the passenger window. Then the passenger door handle lifted. Not hard, not yanked. It rose once, slow and careful, the way you test a door when you do not want the people inside to notice until it is open. Emily shoved herself sideways into the center console. Her shoulder hit mine, and the food box in my lap tipped forward. Drive, she said. She was not asking anymore. I turned the key so fast, I scraped my knuckles on the steering column. The Civic coughed once, before it caught, and my chicken tenders hit the floorboard. Ranch went across my shoe. I looked down for half a second, which is stupid, but I did. My brain grabbed the dumb normal problem first. Emily grabbed my sleeve. Go. I hit the wipers by mistake before I clicked the headlights to high. The blades dragged across the wet windshield and the light pushed out over the pull-off. But it only showed what was in front of us. The sign, the guardrail, the low bushes beyond the nose of the car, empty, wet gravel. Something had tested the door, but whoever did it was in the part beside her door I could not see. I did not turn. I shoved the car in reverse and backed up too fast. The tires spun in the gravel, and for 1 second I thought we were stuck. I did not yell. I did not honk. I did not ask who was there. I just rocked the wheel, got traction, and swung the car around ugly enough that the front bumper scraped something low near the edge of the pull-off. As soon as the car pointed toward the road, I drove. The overlook disappeared behind us, but that road does not let you go fast. Every curve made the passenger window flash black woods, then guardrail, then black woods again. Neither of us talked for a bit. Then, because I was still trying to make it normal somehow, I said maybe somebody needed help. Maybe they thought we were someone else. Maybe it was some drunk guy messing with cars at the overlook. I could hear how weak it sounded while I said it. Emily did not answer. She just stared at her window, like she expected fingers to come over the edge of the glass while we were still moving. I drove to her house because it was closer than mine. Her parents had the side porch light on. I pulled in and left the car running for a second, with both hands still on the wheel. Then Emily said real quiet, "Look at my door." I did not want to. I got out anyway. Under that porch light, the passenger side looked worse than it had any right to look. There was a dark smear under the handle. Not a handprint. Nothing clean like in a movie. Just mud dragged across the paint, where fingers had been. The window had cloudy, greasy marks low on the glass, near where Emily's shoulder had been, in one partial print that looked like it came from a thin plastic glove, or one of those cheap work gloves with rubber on the palm. It was broken up and slid sideways, like somebody had been crouched beside the car, leaning close, breathing on glass that was already fogged from the inside. Emily stood behind me, with her arms wrapped around herself. I took pictures with my phone, 3 or 4 of them, all bad, because my hands would not hold still. We talked about calling someone, but what were we going to say? No plate, no face, no car, no real description. Just a passenger door. Somebody had checked once in the dark. Later, I thought about the cash tips on the counter, our name badges, the man at the register asking about the road. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was not. We never stopped at that overlook again. But the handle is not what stays with me most. What I remember is how long I sat there beside her, calling real signals ordinary night sounds. The obvious wrong here is the person crouched beside that car, testing the passenger door like they had a right to get in. That is a hard boundary, and once someone touches that handle, there is no innocent version of it anymore. But there's also a very real lesson in the narrator's reaction. When someone you trust says, "Start the car," just start the car. You don't need to win the argument against the dark. You don't need to prove it's probably a possum. I feel bad for him because he clearly carries that guilt. But Emily's instincts were dead on. The locked door and her refusal to let it go may have saved them. And now, let's keep going. I think someone was living under our rental house, and we kept calling it old house stuff. This happened when I was 18, maybe 19, in eastern Tennessee. I still feel stupid for how long we stayed, but we were broke in the real way. Not rough month broke. Don't mess up this rental broke. My mom worked unstable shifts, and my stepdad Ray had just lost his warehouse job. He took temp work with the county property assessor's office, driving back roads with a clipboard and county camera, photographing houses, and keeping notices on his passenger seat. People did not love seeing that truck, with tax sale notices going around. The house came through a friend of a friend. The landlord took a cash deposit, barely asked about credit, and promised to fix the little stuff later. Kitchen floor dipped. Bathroom smelled damp. It sat on block piers with crooked lattice around the bottom, and one back panel was held shut with twisted wire and a brick. Along one side, weeds covered most of the lattice. I noticed it, taking trash out. I didn't think, hey, that's an entrance. I thought, yep, another crappy rental. The first noises were easy to explain. Scraping under the kitchen. Slow bumps, like a loose pipe. My little sister said she heard someone turning over under her room, but she was 12 and scared, so we acted like she was being dramatic. Ray said possums. Mom said old insulation. Then the vents started smelling like wet dirt and old cloth, more like laundry that had been buried. A couple times, I checked the back panel, and the brick Ray put there had moved a little, not tossed aside, just not how we left it. I would put it back with my foot and feel stupid. Around then, Ray started coming home from county routes, angry. One man yelled from a gravel road that he needed to stop photographing people's houses. At another address, a woman near a tree called him the picture man. When the smell got bad enough, Ray crawled under the house with a flashlight and gloves. He was not under there long. The crawl space was low and muddy with pipes close to the joists and block piers everywhere. We heard him cussing through the floor. Then he got quiet. Mom leaned toward the kitchen vent and asked if he was okay. Ray said, "That ain't an animal." He backed out, dragging a torn black trash bag. Inside were a dirty blanket, food cans, a plastic bottle, a dead flashlight, receipts, and folded damp papers that looked like property or tax notices. He said there was more behind a pipe, but he wasn't crawling deeper without the landlord there. The landlord got irritated on the phone. He said animals and drifters got under old houses all the time, promised to send someone, and told Mom not to make drama unless something was missing. For 2 days, almost nothing happened. The smell faded after Ray left the bag outside by the shed. Then one evening, we were eating boxed macaroni when 3 knocks came from directly under Ray's chair. Not pipes, not scratching, knocks. Ray pushed his chair back and hit his boot heel down once. After a pause, from under the floor, a muffled woman's voice said, "Picture man." I know people will ask why we didn't leave right then. I get it. But leaving meant money we didn't have. Losing the deposit and probably sleeping in somebody's living room. Ray went back under because he was embarrassed and angry, not brave. He kept saying he needed proof the landlord couldn't laugh off and the sheriff couldn't file away as animal activity. I followed him outside with a second flashlight. The back panel was already loose. The twisted wire had been turned out from the inside. Ray said, "Hold the light steady." He went in flat on his stomach, dragging himself with his elbows. The pipes were so low under the kitchen that he had to turn his shoulders sideways. Then something moved ahead of him. Not behind him. Ahead. A slow scrape behind one of the cinder block piers. Ray froze. His flashlight beam stopped shaking. A woman's voice said something deeper in. I couldn't hear all of it, but I heard pictures. Taxes. Houses. Then she said, "Picture man," again. Ray started backing up. He wasn't arguing anymore. He just said, "All right, I'm coming out." That was when dirt hit him in the face. A wet clump came from behind the pier, low and sideways, with old pink insulation stuck in it. He choked and dropped his flashlight. Ray shoved back, slammed his shoulder into a pipe, tried to twist around, and got caught between a low beam and one of the block supports. Then he screamed, "My name." I grabbed his boot, but I only pulled it half off his foot. He was kicking and coughing, yelling that his eyes were burning. Mom tried calling 911, but the phone had one bar and then none. So she ran toward the road, holding it over her head. I got both hands around Ray's ankle and pulled until my palms burned. He barely moved. Then I saw movement off to the side of the house. Not a face, just a sleeve or an arm slipping behind another broken piece of lattice, hidden behind those weeds. The crawl space wrapped around that way. We had never checked it. Mr. Hensley, our neighbor, came because of the screaming. He pulled up with a bottle jack, 2 boards, and a yellow work light. He didn't raise the house, like some people later said. He wedged boards under the sagging edge and gave us maybe 2 inches. Maybe. It was just enough. Ray screamed the whole time we dragged him out. Mom had gotten enough signal from the road to call, then came back crying. The 3 of us pulled him through mud and insulation until his shoulders cleared the panel. His face was swollen almost shut. He had fiberglass in his mouth, scratches down both arms, and wet dirt packed into his eyes. The deputies showed up later. They found footprints in the mud, 2 loose panels, and the rest of that trash bag moved from where Ray swore he left it. Whoever was under there was gone. The report said possible trespassing. The landlord came the next afternoon, drove screws through a few panels, said that was good enough for now, and left. After that, everybody had a version. A relative of the old owner, a woman sleeping in her car after a tax sale, someone local nobody wanted trouble with. We didn't leave the next day. It took a few weeks to get another place lined up. Until then, Ray kept his toolbox pushed against the back panel. I checked the wire every evening before dark, and Mom moved the kitchen table so nobody sat over that spot anymore. This story is infuriating because so many adults failed before it ever got violent. The landlord saw a broken crawl space as someone else's problem. The family kept having to call real warning signs old house stuff because they were broke and didn't have easy options. And whoever was under that house wasn't just hiding there. They were invading a family's home from underneath it, listening, moving things, and then attacking Ray when he tried to prove what was happening. That is such a nasty violation of safety. Your floor is supposed to be part of your home, not a hiding place for someone waiting below you. I'm just glad the neighbor actually showed up when it mattered. All right, next one. I don't trust GPS detours. If one pulls me off the interstate onto county roads I've never heard of, I stop somewhere and check the route. I used to think that was overkill. My girlfriend and I were driving back from seeing friends, and the car was a mess. Wrappers in the doors, chargers around the shifter, bags on the back seat, a cooler with melted ice. We had maybe $60 in cash, because a few places earlier had card readers that kept timing out. The car was her mom's older compact crossover, higher than a sedan, okay on gravel, but not a Jeep. I was nervous driving it through West Virginia. Traffic slowed, then stopped. A trooper went by, then an ambulance. The map flashed red for an accident ahead. Service was spotty, but the GPS reloaded long enough to offer a detour. 42 minutes longer, but moving. My girlfriend asked if we should wait. I said no too fast. I was tired and didn't want to act unsure in front of her. I was driving, so I wanted to seem like I had it handled. So I took the exit with a bunch of other cars. For 10 minutes, it felt normal. Then most of them turned toward a bigger road, and our GPS sent us farther into the hills. We stopped at a small gas station beside a closed farmer's market, or what used to be one. Empty produce stalls, crates by the fence, pallets, a cracked sign frame, blue tarp in the weeds. A pickup sat under the canopy, but not really at a pump, and an old flatbed was parked back by the market lot. While I pumped gas, a man at the next pump kept looking over. Ball cap, work pants, gray in his beard. At first, I thought he was looking at our out-of-state plates. Then I noticed he kept looking through the rear glass at our bags, cooler, and phone cords. Inside, I grabbed water and gum. The card reader had a cash preferred sign, so I paid cash. Another guy stood near the hot food case, not buying anything. When I got back out, my girlfriend was stiff in the passenger seat, with the doors locked. I held up the waters like, really? She didn't smile. That guy keeps looking at the back seat. She nodded toward the canopy. The pump guy was already walking toward us. Another man stood half in the shade, by the corner facing our car. The pump guy asked if I had jumper cables. I said I didn't think so. I did, but I didn't want to open the cargo area in front of him. He said his truck was dead, around back. Come on, man. Folks don't leave folks stuck out here. I had one hand on the door thinking I'd just make it quick. Then my girlfriend said, "Low. His hood isn't even open." I looked at the pickup under the canopy. Hood down. Nobody near it. The flatbed behind the market sat quiet too. I told him we had to get back to the interstate. His face didn't change. He stood there, one beat too long. Then he shrugged and said, "Suit yourself." I got in. My girlfriend locked the doors before I even had my seatbelt on. I backed out too fast and hit a pothole hard enough to bounce both of us. I felt stupid. Rude, jumpy, stupid. After we left, I talked too much. Maybe his truck was farther back. Maybe the hood thing meant nothing. Maybe we were tired and making it weird. She didn't argue. She kept checking the mirror. The GPS did not take us back to the interstate. It put us on a county road that climbed and bent between ridges. It was paved technically, but narrow, with blind curves and shoulders that disappeared into gravel, weeds, and drops. We passed a trailer, a mailbox hanging open, a little white church, and then nothing again. My phone went from 2 bars to 1 to no service. Hers did the same. She said, "Can we turn around?" I wanted to, but every driveway looked too tight or too blind, and stopping across both lanes felt like its own bad idea. I told her I'd turn around when I found a safe place. That was true, but also me not wanting to say I had put us on the wrong road. A couple turns later, headlights showed up in the mirror. At first, stupidly, that made me feel better. Another vehicle meant maybe this really was a normal detour. Then it got closer, and I could tell it was a pickup. I can't swear it was the same one from the gas station. It was dark and older, with one headlight brighter than the other. It settled behind us and stayed there. I slowed before a curve, thinking maybe he'd pass. He didn't. I sped up on a straight stretch. He matched it. I was still telling myself it was just a local road, a local driver, same detour. Then we came around a blind left-hand curve and something was across the road. Not a tree, not a wreck, junk. Produced crates, a busted pallet, 2 plastic bins, part of an old sign frame, and a sheet of blue tarp across most of the lane. It didn't fully block the right edge, but the only gap was where the pavement broke down toward a culvert. I hit the brakes and my girlfriend grabbed the dash. Behind us, the pickup stopped too. Too close. There was no room to back up. Washed out edge on my right, bank and trees on my left, truck close enough that I could see the driver's shape through the windshield. My girlfriend said my name once, then pointed. One crate had a torn green and yellow sticker on it, or what looked like one, the same kind she'd noticed by the market stalls, dirty and half peeled off. I couldn't read it. I couldn't prove anything, but my foot came off the brake and just hovered there. The passenger door opened, a man got out, and came toward us fast. Another stayed by the truck. The first one went straight to our rear door handle and yanked it hard enough to rock the car. My girlfriend had her phone out, trying 911. Still no service. I tried to throw the car into reverse and hit neutral instead. The engine revved, and we went nowhere. That half second still bothers me. Then something hit the back glass, not a fist, metal. The rear window went white with cracks. My girlfriend screamed once. In the mirror, I saw one of our bags slide off the seat, and behind it, the man lifting what looked like a tire iron for another swing. Nobody made a big threat. It was just hands on the doors, metal on glass. The truck behind us, the junk in front of us. I got it into reverse and backed up maybe 2 feet before I had to stop or hit the pickup. The man by the rear door jumped back. I cut the wheel right because there was nowhere else. The shoulder was barely a shoulder. Gravel, mud, weeds, washed out around the culvert. If we had been in a lower car, I don't think we would have made it. Even in that crossover, it was stupid. Not brave. Not planned. Just the one bad option that wasn't staying there. I hit the gas. The front end dropped off the pavement. The bottom scraped so loud, I thought we'd ripped something open. The bumper caught on something, and the car kicked sideways. For a second, the right wheels were down in the washout, and the left wheels were still fighting for pavement, and I thought that was it. Then the tires grabbed. The crossover dragged itself along the edge and bounced back onto the road, past the junk. I almost put us into the opposite bank. My girlfriend still had both hands braced against the dash, phone in one of them, no call going through. I didn't stop, I just drove. There wasn't a long chase after that. The car made a rubbing sound from the right front wheel, and a warning light came on. The rear window stayed in place, but it looked like cracked ice. Every bump dropped little pieces of glass onto our bags. I kept going until the road widened, and houses started showing up closer together. My phone caught one bar, lost it, then caught 2. We pulled into a lit-up little store with pumps out front. Not really a town, just enough light and people that I could stop. The call went through there. We gave statements. A deputy took pictures of the glass, the bumper, and the scrape underneath. My girlfriend had a dark bruise coming up across her shoulder from the seatbelt, and she kept touching it, like she didn't believe it was hers. They checked the gas station camera, or said they did. It showed our crossover, the pickup, and a few shapes under the canopy, but glare and dirt on the lens turned faces and plates into smears. The county road had no cameras, and by the time anyone went back, the junk was either gone or just looked like roadside trash. What we had left was the cracked rear window, the torn up bumper, glass in our bags, that bruise on my girlfriend, and the memory of him looking at our out-of-state plates, then through the rear glass at our bags and phones, and then asking me to come behind the building. while the other man waited at the corner. This is one of those stories where the bad behavior is so clear it almost doesn't need explaining. Those men weren't helping. They were watching the bags, testing whether the driver would open the back, and then using the road itself like a trap. That is predatory. And yeah, the narrator made a few tired, pride-based choices, but that doesn't make him responsible for people setting up an ambush. The common sense takeaway is simple. You are allowed to be rude when something feels wrong. You are allowed to leave. You do not owe strangers access to your car, your cargo area, or your time, especially when your girlfriend is telling you the situation feels off. GPS can reroute you around traffic. It cannot warn you about people. And that is where we're going to end this one. I don't know about you, but this whole batch had that really uncomfortable kind of fear to it, where nothing feels impossible. No monsters, no big dramatic warning signs. Just people making normal decisions and slowly realizing they are way less safe than they thought. The thing that stuck with me most is how often the danger was close, before anyone could prove it. A sound outside the tent, a whisper in a trailer, a door handle moving in the dark. That stuff gets under your skin because it feels like something you could talk yourself out of noticing. Let me know in the comments which story bothered you the most, because I'm honestly curious. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and thank you so much for watching and spending your time here. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one.